The children cried for bread. When I reached out, I saw their skin glowed like the stars. Part 1. The Signal in the Void. The ship was old, but she was strong. Her name was Dandelion Seed, and she carried food and medicine to the forgotten corners of the galaxy. She was not a warship. She was not fast or beautiful. But to the dying colonies on the edge of known space, she was the most beautiful thing they had ever seen. Captain Park stood at the bridge window and watched the stars pass by. He was 43 years old, with gray in his hair and tired lines around his eyes. He had been a soldier once, long ago. Now he delivered rice and antibiotics to people who had nothing. It was quieter work. He preferred it. Behind him, his pilot was singing softly to herself as she checked the navigation systems. She was young, only 26, with quick hands and a quicker smile. She had joined the crew 2 years ago and had never once complained about the long trips through empty space. The medical officer sat in the corner reading reports on her tablet. She was serious and careful, the kind of doctor who remembered every patient she had ever lost. She did not smile often, but when she did, it meant something. And in the engine room below, Lee was talking to the ship like it was his child. He was the oldest crew member, 51 years old, and he knew every bolt and wire on the Dandelion Seed. He said the ship had a soul. The others pretended not to believe him, but secretly they all did. They were 3 weeks into a routine supply run when everything changed. It started with a sound. A small beep from the communications panel. Stopped singing and looked at her screen. Her eyebrows came together in confusion. "Captain," she said, "I am getting something strange." Walked over and looked at the screen. There was a signal coming from somewhere nearby. It was weak and broken, cutting in and out like a dying heartbeat, but it was definitely there. "What is it?" he asked. Shook her head. "I do not know. It is not a human signal. The pattern is different, but it is definitely a distress call." Looked up from her tablet. "Where is it coming from?" Typed quickly on her keyboard. A map appeared on the main screen, showing a small moon that was not in any of their charts. It was designated only by a number, XR7741. No one had ever been there. No one had ever thought to go. "The signal is coming from there," said, "from the surface." Stared at the moon on the screen. It was a ball of ice and rock, spinning alone in the darkness. There was no reason for anyone to be there, and yet someone was calling for help. "How old is the signal?" he asked. Checked her readings. Her face went pale. "Captain, this signal has been broadcasting for a very long time, maybe years, maybe longer." The bridge was silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Someone had been calling for help in the darkness and no one had come. For years they had called. For years they had been alone. Made his decision quickly. "Change course. We are going to that moon." Hesitated. "Captain, we have a schedule. The colonies are waiting for their supplies if we are late." "I know," said, "but someone is asking for help. We cannot just fly past." Stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the stars for a long moment. Then she turned back to the captain. "He is right," she said quietly. "We have to go." Nodded slowly and began to enter new coordinates. The Dandelion Seed turned gently in the void and began moving toward the unknown moon. It took 6 hours to reach XR7741. As they got closer, came up from the engine room to look. The moon was ugly, covered in gray ice and deep cracks. There was no atmosphere, no water, no sign of life. It looked like a place where things came to die. But the signal was still there, still calling. "I am scanning the surface," said. "There is something there. A large metal object buried in the ice near the equator. It looks like a ship." "A ship," said. "What kind of ship?" Shook her head. "I have never seen anything like it. The design is completely unknown. It is not human. It is not from any species we have contact with." Felt a cold feeling in his stomach. In all his years of traveling the stars, he had met many alien species. Most were friendly. Some were not, but he had never seen a completely unknown ship before. This was something new. "Are there any life signs?" asked. Checked her sensors. For a moment she did not answer. Then she looked up with wide eyes. "Yes, 17, but they are weak, very weak, they are fatting. 17 lives. 17 beings dying alone on a frozen moon." Did not hesitate. "Prepare for landing, we are going down." The dandelion seed descended through the thin layer of dust that passed for an atmosphere. The landing was rough, and the ship shook hard as it touched the ice. But work was good, and nothing broke. They put on their environmental suits and stepped outside. The cold was terrible, even through the suits. The ice stretched in every direction, gray and empty under a black sky full of stars. The alien ship was 200 meters away. It was huge, much bigger than the dandelion seed. But it was also broken. One side was crushed, buried deep in the ice. Pieces of metal were scattered across the surface. Whatever had happened to this ship, it had happened a long time ago. They walked toward it slowly, their boots crunching on the frozen ground, carried a medical bag, carried tools, stayed on the ship to monitor communications, led the way. The entrance to the alien ship was half open, frozen in place. Pushed it wider with his shoulder, and they stepped inside. The darkness was complete. Their helmet lights cut through it like thin white knives. The walls were covered with strange symbols that none of them could read. The air inside was thin and cold, barely enough to breathe. They moved forward carefully. Every few steps they passed another body. The aliens were tall and thin, with long limbs and smooth, pale skin. They were all dead. They had died protecting something. Their bodies were arranged in defensive positions, facing outward as if they had fought against something until their last breath. "What happened here?" whispered. No one answered. There was no answer to give. They followed the corridor deeper into the ship. The life signs on scanner were getting closer. 17 lights, blinking weakly in the darkness. Finally, they reached a large central room. In the middle of the room, there was a pod made of clear material. Inside the pod, huddled together for warmth, were the survivors. They were children. 17 alien children, small and thin and starving. Their skin was different from the dead adults. It was not just pale, it was almost transparent. And beneath the skin, there was a faint light like tiny stars burning inside them. The light was dim and weak, barely visible, but it was there. Fell to her knees beside the pod, her hands were shaking. "They are alive," she said. "Barely, they are starving. They need food and warmth immediately." Looked at the children through the clear wall of the pod. They were looking back at him. Their eyes were large and dark and full of fear, but there was also something else in those eyes, something like hope. The smallest child pressed its tiny hand against the wall of the pod. Its mouth opened, and even through the suit, could hear the sound it made. It was a cry, a single, simple cry that needed no translation. The child was hungry. The child wanted bread. Put his hand against the wall, matching the child's small palm with his own. Through his glove, he could see the faint glow beneath the child's skin, pulsing weakly like a dying star. "Get every ration we have," he said quietly. "All of it now." Behind him, his crew was already moving. The children cried for bread. When I reached out, I saw their skin glowed like the stars. Part 2, the hollow ship. The pod opened with a soft hiss. Cold air rushed out, carrying a strange smell that was both sweet and sad. The children inside did not move at first. They stayed huddled together, their thin arms wrapped around each other, their glowing skin flickering like candles in the wind. Moved slowly. She knew that scared children, no matter what species they were, needed gentle hands and soft voices. She crouched down beside the pod and held out her palm. In her hand was a small piece of emergency bread, the kind that every ship carried for disasters. The smallest child watched her with huge dark eyes. Its glow was the weakest of all, barely a shimmer under its pale skin, could see its ribs through its thin body. She did not know how long these children had been starving, but she knew it had been too long. "It is okay," she said softly. "I will not hurt you. This is food. Do you understand food?" The child did not understand her words, but it understood her voice. Slowly, carefully, it crawled forward on thin legs. Its tiny hand reached out and took the bread from its palm. The first bite was careful. The second was desperate. The child ate like it had never seen food before, pushing the bread into its mouth with both hands. Crumbs fell on its chest, and it picked them up one by one, eating every piece. The other children watched. When they saw that the food was real, that the strangers were not going to hurt them, they began to move forward too. Their movements were slow and painful. Some of them could barely walk. The oldest children helped the youngest, carrying them on their backs or holding their hands. Ran back to the dandelion seed and returned with boxes of rations. He brought everything: bread, protein bars, dried fruit, water bottles, things that were meant for human stomachs. They did not know if alien children could eat human food, but they had to try. Helped carry the supplies. He worked in silence, moving back and forth between the ship and the alien vessel. Each time he entered the central room, he saw more of the children eating. Their glow seemed to grow a little brighter with each bite. It was like watching stars come back to life. Came down from the ship to help. When she saw the children, she stopped walking. Her eyes filled with tears. She had younger brothers back on Earth. She knew what children looked like when they were scared and hungry. "How could anyone leave them like this?" she whispered. No one had an answer. While the children ate, began to examine them. She used her medical scanner carefully, trying to understand their strange bodies. Their biology was different from anything she had ever seen. Their blood was not red but pale blue. Their bones were lighter than human bones, almost hollow like a bird's. And beneath their skin, there was a network of tiny channels that carried light instead of blood. "They are bioluminescent," she said too. "The glow comes from inside them. It is part of their biology. When they are healthy, I think they shine very bright. But when they are sick or starving, the light fades." Looked at the children. Most of them were glowing a little brighter now, soft pulses of white and pale blue moving under their skin. But a few of them were still very dim. Those were the sickest ones. "Can you help them?" he asked. Took a deep breath. "I do not know. Their bodies are so different from ours. I am doing my best, but I am not sure what medicine to give them. I am not even sure what will hurt them." She worked through the night. She tested everything carefully, giving tiny amounts of medicine and watching for reactions. Some things worked. Some things did not. Slowly, very slowly, she learned how to help them. Worked on the alien ship systems. The power was almost gone, but he managed to restart a small generator. Heat began to flow through the central room. The children stopped shivering. They gathered around the warm vents and pressed their bodies close together. As the hours passed, something began to change. The oldest child, a girl who looked about 12 or 13 in human years, started to watch very carefully. Her glow was stronger than the others, a soft golden color that pulsed steadily under her skin. Her eyes were intelligent and curious. Noticed her watching him. He walked over and sat down on the floor near her, keeping his movements slow and calm. He did not want to scare her. "Hello," he said. "My name is—" The girl tilted her head. She did not understand his words, but she seemed to understand that he was trying to communicate. She pointed at herself and made a sound, a soft, musical tone that rose and fell like a song. Tried to repeat the sound, but his human throat could not make it properly. The girl smiled. It was the first smile any of the children had shown. In that moment, she looked just like any human child, amused by an adult who could not do something simple. Pointed at her and then at the stars visible through a crack in the ship's hull. He made a gesture like twinkling lights. The girl's eyes widened. She understood. She pointed at herself again and made the musical sound, then pointed at the stars. Her people were connected to the stars somehow. Their glow was not just biology, it meant something more. Decided to give her a human name just for now, just until they could learn her real one. He called her. It meant star in his language. When he said it and pointed at her, she smiled again and repeated the word carefully. She said, her accent was strange, but the word was clear. Over the next few days, began to teach them about her people. She could not speak their language, but she had another way of communicating. When she concentrated hard, her glow would brighten, and images would appear in the minds of those nearby. It was like dreaming while awake, pictures and feelings that flowed directly from her thoughts to theirs. The crew gathered around her as she shared her memories. They saw a beautiful world with crystal cities and purple skies. They saw her people walking through gardens of light, their bodies glowing bright enough to turn night into day. They saw children playing and adults singing, and a civilization that had existed for millions of years. And then they saw the darkness come. Ships appeared in the sky, huge black warships with weapons that burned everything they touched. People tried to fight, but they were not warriors. They were teachers and healers and artists. They did not know how to make war. The enemy was called the Dominion. They ruled half the galaxy with fear and violence. They had heard of people, they were called, and they were afraid. They could inspire others. They could teach other species to work together to stand against tyranny. The Dominion could not allow that. So they decided to destroy them completely. The war lasted only a few months. They were scattered, hunted, killed. Their beautiful cities were burned to ash. Their crystal towers were broken into dust. Everything they had built over millions of years was destroyed in less than a year. The survivors ran. They hid in the corners of the galaxy, hoping the Dominion would forget about them. But the Dominion never forgot. They hunted them for generations, killing everyone they found. This ship was one of the last. The adults on board had taken the children and run as far as they could, hopping to find a place where the Dominion could not reach them. They had traveled for years, jumping from system to system, always running, always hiding. But their ship was old and damaged. One day, something broke and they crashed on this frozen moon. The adults tried to fix the ship, but they could not. They were trapped. They sent out a distress signal. They called for help across all frequencies, in all languages they knew. They waited and hoped and prayed. No one came. One by one, the adults died. Some died from injuries. Some died from sickness. Some died simply because they gave all their food to the children and kept nothing for themselves. They died protecting the young ones, the last hope of their entire species. For 200 years, the children had survived in the pod. The pod had kept them in a kind of sleep, using almost no energy, keeping them barely alive. But the power was running out. In a few more months, the pod would have failed. The children would have died. And then the dandelion seed came. When finished sharing her memories, the crew sat in silence. Tears were running down his face. Hands were shaking. Even, who had seen so many terrible things in his life, felt something break inside his chest. 200 years. For 200 years, these children had called for help, and no one in the entire galaxy had answered. Species had passed by, heard the signal, and kept flying. No one had stopped. No one had cared. Until now. Stood up slowly. He looked at and then at all the other children gathered around her. Their glow was brighter now, soft lights pulsing under their skin like heartbeats. They were still weak. They were still scared. But they were alive. "You are safe now," he said. He did not know if she understood his words, but he said them anyway. "We will protect you, I promise." Looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Her skin was warm and her glow brightened at his touch. She did not need to understand his words. She understood his heart. That was enough. The children cried for bread. When I reached out, I saw their skin glowed like the stars. Part 3. the light beneath the skin. The journey back to human space took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of learning, 3 weeks of healing, 3 weeks of watching 17 broken children slowly come back to life. Worked every day to understand their bodies better. She learned that human food worked well for them, but they needed more water than humans did. She learned that their glow faded when they were sad and brightened when they were happy. She learned that they slept in groups, always touching each other, their lights pulsing together like one shared heartbeat. The smallest child, the one who had first reached out to, was the slowest to recover. Named him, which meant sky. He was maybe 3 or 4 years old in human terms, and he had been the closest to death when they found him. For days, his glow stayed dim, barely visible under his pale skin. But did not give up. She sat with him for hours, feeding him small bites of food, giving him water drop by drop. She sang to him in Korean, soft lullabies that her own mother had sung to her long ago. Did not understand the words, but he understood the love in her voice. Slowly, very slowly, his glow began to return. Spent his time fixing everything he could. The dandelion seed was not made to carry so many passengers, and the life support systems were working very hard. He made adjustments everywhere, improving air flow, fixing temperature controls, making the ship as comfortable as possible for their guests. He also built things for the children, small toys from spare parts, a mobile that hung above their sleeping area, spinning slowly and catching the light, a set of blocks for the younger ones to play with. He was not good with words, but he was very good with his hands. The children loved him for it. Taught the older children how to fly the ship. Not really, of course. They were too young and the controls were too complicated. But she let them sit in the pilot's seat and push buttons that did not do anything important. She let them pretend to steer through the stars. For children who had spent 200 years trapped in a dying pod, the freedom of movement was a gift beyond measure. Stayed close to. She followed him around the ship, watching everything he did, learning human words one by one. She was smart, smarter than any child had ever met. Within a week she could speak in simple sentences. Within 2 weeks she could hold basic conversations. She asked many questions. Why did humans eat 3 times a day? Why did they sleep alone instead of together? Why did they have hair on their heads but not on their arms? Answered as best he could, and in return he asked questions about her people. They were ancient, explained. They had existed for millions of years, far longer than humans had walked on Earth. In the beginning they had been like any other species, fighting and struggling and building civilizations that rose and fell. But over time they had learned something important. Light is connection, said one evening, sitting beside in the ship's small common room. When I glow, I am not alone. I am part of all my people. We feel each other. We share joy. We share pain. We are never truly alone. Thought about this for a long time. Humans did not glow. They did not share their feelings directly with each other. They often felt alone, even when surrounded by others. He wondered what it would be like to always know that someone else understood exactly how you felt. Your people, he said carefully. They could share this feeling with other species too. Nodded. That is why the Dominion feared us. We could help others feel connected. We could show them that they did not have to be alone. When species feel connected, they do not fight each other. They do not allow tyranny. They stand together. She looked down at her hands, which glowed softly in the dim room. The Dominion rules through fear and isolation. They make species afraid of each other. They make them feel alone. We were the opposite. We brought light into the darkness. They could not allow that. Understood now. The Dominion had not destroyed them because they were a military threat. They had destroyed them because they were a threat to the Dominion's way of ruling. Hope was dangerous. Connection was dangerous. They had been too bright, and so they had been extinguished. Almost extinguished. 17 children remained. 17 small lights in the vast darkness of the galaxy. 2 days before they reached human space, something happened that changed everything. It was night cycle on the ship. Most of the crew was asleep, was sitting alone on the bridge, watching the stars when came to find him. Her glow was brighter than usual, pulsing in steady waves of gold and white. "Captain," she said, "I must show you something." She sat down beside him and took his hand. Her touch was warm, and suddenly his mind was filled with images, not memories of the past, but something else. Something that felt like looking into the future. He saw the galaxy spread out before him like a map of lights. Billions of stars, billions of worlds, billions of living beings. Most of the lights were dim, separated, alone. But here and there, small groups of lights were connected, forming clusters of brightness in the darkness. One of those clusters was Earth, humanity, a young species barely beginning to explore the stars. Their light was small but growing, reaching out in all directions, connecting with other lights they encountered. His voice spoke inside his mind. "This is what they saw. This is why we traveled the galaxy. We looked for lights that could grow. We helped them connect. We taught them that they were not alone." The vision shifted, saw the Dominion, a vast shadow spreading across the map, dimming every light it touched. Species that had been bright became dark under its rule. Connections were broken. Hope was crushed. The shadow grew and grew. "The Dominion will find us," said. "They always find the survivors. They will come to your world and demand that you give us to them. They will threaten you. They will try to make you afraid." Felt cold fear in his heart. He had heard stories of the Dominion, a powerful empire that ruled many star systems. He knew that humanity was young and weak compared to them. If the Dominion came with warships, what could Earth possibly do? "Then we will hide you," he said. "We will find somewhere safe." "There is nowhere safe," interrupted gently. "We have been running for 200 years. We have hidden on frozen moons and in the cores of dead planets. They always find us. Running does not work." She squeezed his hand and her glow brightened even more. "But there is another way. We do not have to run. We do not have to hide. We can stand." The vision changed again, saw something impossible. He saw humanity, small, young, weak humanity, standing against the shadow. He saw human ships forming a wall between the darkness and the light. He saw people on 100 worlds rising up, not with weapons but with something else. Something that burned brighter than any weapon. He saw hope. "They could not stand alone," said. "We were teachers, not warriors, but humanity is different. You are young, but you are brave. You fight for things you believe in. You protect those who cannot protect themselves. You have something that most species lose as they grow older." "What is that?" asked. Smiled, and in that moment she looked like a star coming to life. "You still believe that doing the right thing matters, even when it is hard, even when it is dangerous, even when you might lose." She looked into his eyes and he felt her light touching something deep inside him. "When you found us, you did not calculate the cost. You did not ask what we could give you in return. You just helped, because we were hungry, because we were children, because it was right. That is the rarest thing in the galaxy, Captain. That is what makes humanity special." Sat in silence for a long time after left. He looked out at the stars and thought about what she had said. He was not a philosopher. He was just a ship captain who delivered food to hungry people. He did not know anything about destiny or the fate of the galaxy. But he knew one thing for certain. When the Dominion came, and they would come, he would not run. He would not hand over 17 children to be destroyed. He would stand even if it cost him everything. Because some things were worth standing for, even when you could not win. The next morning, the dandelion seed entered human space. Within hours, news of their discovery had spread to every corner of human civilization. The 17 children who glowed like stars had come home. And the galaxy would never be the same. The children cried for bread. When I reached out, I saw their skin glowed like the stars. Part 4: The Dominion's Shadow. The news spread like fire across dry grass. Every news channel, every social media platform, Every conversation on every human world was about the same thing: the 17 alien children who glowed like stars. People watched videos of them eating human food. They saw pictures of Little sleeping in arms. They saw speaking her first words in Korean, her golden glow brightening with each new word she learned. The children became famous overnight. Some people called them angels, others called them hope. Children on Earth drew pictures of them in school, trying to capture the soft light beneath their skin with crayons and colored pencils. Scientists wanted to study them. Philosophers wanted to talk to them. Everyone wanted to know more about the last survivors of the. But not everyone was happy. 3 weeks after the dandelion seed returned home, the Dominion sent a message. It arrived at the United Earth Council headquarters at exactly midnight, Earth time. The message was simple and cold, like a knife made of words. The Dominion claimed that the 17 children were their property. They said they were criminals who had broken Dominion law generations ago. They demanded that the children be handed over immediately. If humanity refused, there would be consequences. The council met in emergency session. Representatives from every human world gathered in a great hall, their faces pale and worried. They had all seen reports about the Dominion. They knew that the Dominion's fleet was 100 times larger than humanity's. They knew that the Dominion had destroyed species before, wiping them out completely, erasing their history from the galaxy. "We cannot fight them," one representative said. His name was Han, and he spoke for the colony worlds on the eastern edge of human space. "Our military is not ready. Our defenses are not strong enough. If we refuse their demand, they will destroy us." Others nodded in agreement. The numbers were clear. Humanity had about 200 warships. The Dominion had thousands. In a direct war, humanity would be crushed in days. "Then we should negotiate," another representative said. She was Park from the inner colonies. "Perhaps we can make a deal. We give them the children and they leave us alone. It is the logical choice." The logical choice. A new voice cut through the murmuring. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. Captain Park stood at the entrance to the great hall. He was still wearing his ship uniform, dirty from weeks of space travel. He had not been invited to this meeting. He had come anyway. "I found those children starving on a frozen moon," he said, walking forward. His voice was not loud, but it filled the room. "They had been calling for help for 200 years. 200 years, and no one in the entire galaxy stopped to answer. We were the first." He stopped in the center of the hall, surrounded by the most powerful people in human civilization. He was just a supply ship captain. He had no authority here, but he spoke anyway. "They reached out their hands like any hungry child would, trusting, hopping, and we fed them. We took them in. We promised to protect them." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every representative. "Now the Dominion comes with threats and we consider handing them over. What does that say about us? What does that say about humanity?" Representative Han shook his head. "Captain, I understand your feelings, but we are talking about billions of lives, human lives. If we refuse the Dominion, they will attack. Men, women, children, all of them will suffer because we decided to protect 17 aliens." "And if we give in," shot back, "if we hand over 17 starving children because we are afraid, then we tell the galaxy that human compassion has a price. We tell every species watching that humanity will sell out the innocent to save ourselves. We become exactly what the Dominion wants us to be: afraid, alone, willing to do anything to survive." He took a deep breath. "I was a soldier once. I have seen what happens when people choose safety over principle. It never ends with one surrender. There is always another demand, another threat, another choice between what is right and what is easy. The moment we give in, we start down a road that leads to darkness." The hall was silent. People were listening now, really listening. Continued, his voice softer but no less strong. "Those children have a gift. They can share their light with others. They can make species feel connected, feel hope. That is why the Dominion wants to destroy them, not because they are dangerous in a military sense, but because hope itself is dangerous to tyrants. He looked at who was watching from a side door, her glow bright and steady. If we protect them, we become something the galaxy has not seen in a long time. We become a species that stands for something more than survival. We become a light in the darkness. And if we are destroyed, Representative Park asked quietly, smiled though there was sadness in his eyes. Then we are destroyed standing up instead of dying on our knees. Our children will know that their parents chose honor over fear. The galaxy will know that one species, at least, refused to abandon the helpless. Maybe that knowledge will be enough to inspire others. Maybe our light will continue to burn, even if we are gone. The debate continued for hours after that, but something had changed. Words had touched something deep in the hearts of the representatives. They were not just politicians calculating numbers. They were human beings, with children of their own, with memories of being scared and hoping someone would protect them. In the end, the vote was close, but the majority chose to refuse the Dominion's demand. Humanity would stand. The response from the galaxy was immediate. The Dominion sent a fleet, not their full force, but more than enough to destroy everything humanity had built. 200 massive warships, each one carrying weapons that could burn entire cities in seconds. They moved toward human space slowly, giving humanity time to feel fear, time to change their minds. Other species watched from the shadows. Some sent messages of condolence, as if humanity were already dead. Others simply watched in silence, waiting to see what would happen. But on Earth, something unexpected began to happen. The first volunteers arrived at military headquarters just hours after the council's vote. They were young people, mostly, students and workers and parents who had never held a weapon in their lives. They came to enlist, to fight, to do whatever they could to help. "I saw those kids on the news," one young woman said. Her name was, and she was a school teacher from. "I saw the little one, he looks just like my nephew. I could not stay home and do nothing." More came, then more. Within days, enlistment offices across human space were overwhelmed. Retired soldiers came back to service. Scientists left their laboratories to work on defense systems. Engineers worked through the night to build more ships, more weapons, more shields. On colony worlds, people built shelters and organized supplies. They knew that many of them might die, but they also knew why they were fighting. Every home had pictures of the 17 children. Every family talked about what they meant. "We are not just fighting for ourselves," an old man told his on a colony near the outer rim. "We are fighting for what we want to be. We are fighting to prove that humanity is more than just another species trying to survive. We are proving that we care about what is right." The children themselves became symbols, appeared on broadcasts, speaking in her careful, accented Korean. "You are protecting us," she said, her glow bright enough to illuminate the room. "We do not know how to thank you. We never thought any species would stand for us. We had given up hope." She paused and tears rolled down her glowing cheeks. But hope came anyway. Hope has a human face. 2 weeks before the Dominion fleet arrived, something else unexpected happened. 3 other species, small, weak, long-suffering under Dominion rule, sent secret messages to Earth. They could not fight openly. They were too scared, too broken. But they could share information. They could tell humanity about weaknesses in Dominion ships. They could help in small ways, hoping that maybe, just maybe, humanity would prove that standing up was possible. The humans who received these messages wept with gratitude. They had thought they were alone. They had thought no one else in the galaxy cared. But the children had been right. Hope was contagious. Light spreads from one flame to another. On the day before the Dominion fleet arrived, Captain stood on the bridge of a new ship. The dandelion seed was too small for war, so he had been given command of a destroyer called the Morning Star. It was not a large ship, not a powerful ship, but it was his. Was his pilot again, was his engineer. had stayed behind with the children. They needed her more than the fleet did, but she had made promise to come back. "I will do my best," he had said. She had taken his hand and squeezed it hard. "Do better than your best. Those children are waiting for you. I am waiting for you." Now, looking out at the stars, thought about everything that had led to this moment. A broken signal on a frozen moon. 17 hungry children. A choice that should have been simple but somehow changed everything. He did not know if they would win. He did not know if he would survive. But he knew with complete certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The first Dominion ships appeared on the edge of sensor range. Their shadows blotted out the stars. The battle of the outer rim had begun. The children cried for bread. When I reached out, I saw their skin glowed like the stars. Part 5. The Stars Remember. The Dominion fleet came like a storm across the darkness. 200 warships, each one the size of a small city, their weapons glowing with terrible energy. They moved in perfect formation, confident and unstoppable. They had destroyed civilizations before. They expected to destroy another one today. The human fleet was smaller, much smaller. 87 ships of all sizes, from massive carriers to tiny patrol craft. They were spread in a defensive line at the edge of human space, a thin wall of metal and courage between the enemy and everything humanity had built. Captain stood on the bridge of the Morning Star, watching the enemy ships grow larger on his screens. His crew was silent, focused, afraid but determined. Hands moved steadily over the flight controls, spoke quietly to his engines, coaxing every bit of power from them. "All ships, this is Admiral," a voice said over the fleet communication channel. The Admiral was an old woman with a calm voice and steady eyes. She had fought in 3 wars and had never lost a battle, but she had never faced anything like this before. "The enemy outnumbers us. They outgun us. By every calculation, we should lose today." She paused. The fleet waited. "But those calculations do not include our hearts. They do not measure our will. They do not count the 17 children who are depending on us, or the billions of people who chose to stand instead of kneel." Her voice grew stronger. "Today we fight for something more than survival. We fight for the kind of species we want to be. We fight so that one day our children can say, when it mattered most, humanity chose courage." "All ships engage." The battle began. The first hour was terrible. The Dominion weapons were powerful and their shields were strong. Human ships exploded one by one, their crews dying in fire and silence. The Morning Star shook with every impact, alarms screaming, systems failing, worked miracles just to keep them flying. But humanity did not break. Every time a ship fell, others moved to fill the gap. Pilots who had never seen combat flew into the enemy's guns, sacrificing themselves to protect the ships behind them. Engineers kept damaged vessels running on nothing but willpower. Captains made impossible choices, sending their crews into danger while knowing many would not return. And slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The Dominion had expected easy prey. They had expected fear and surrender. Instead, they found humans who fought with desperate fury, who refused to retreat, who kept coming no matter how many fell. The secret information from the 3 friendly species helped too. Human missiles found weak spots in Dominion shields. Human weapons struck at vulnerable systems. 12 hours into the battle, the first Dominion ship was destroyed. It exploded in a ball of white light, and across the human fleet, tired crews cheered. It was just one ship. The Dominion still had many more, but it proved something important. The enemy could be hurt. The enemy could be beaten. The battle lasted 3 days. 3 days of fighting without rest. 3 days of death and fire and impossible courage. By the end, half the human fleet was destroyed. Thousands of people were dead. The Morning Star was barely holding together, her hull cracked and bleeding air, her weapons nearly empty. But the Dominion fleet was retreating. They had lost 60 ships, 60 ships that were supposed to be invincible. They had expected victory in hours and instead found a war they could not easily win. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion had met a species that did not bow. They had met humanity. As the enemy ships jumped away, disappearing into the darkness between stars, a sound filled the communication channels. It started on one ship and spread to another, then another, until every surviving vessel was filled with it. Humans were cheering, they were crying, they were hugging each other and laughing and weeping all at once. They had done the impossible. They had stood against the darkness, and the darkness had blinked first. On the bridge of the Morning Star, sat in his captain's chair and felt tears running down his face. He was exhausted beyond words. His body ached. His mind was numb. But somewhere deep inside, he felt something warm and bright growing. They had won. Not completely. The Dominion would return someday with a larger fleet with more determination. This was not the end of the war. It was only the beginning. But today, right now, they had won. Captain said softly, "We have a communication request from Earth." Wiped his eyes, put it through. The screen flickered and suddenly he was looking at. She was standing in a bright room, surrounded by 17 glowing children. Was at her side, her golden light stronger than had ever seen it. Little was in his arms, his small body shining like a tiny sun. "You did it," said. Her voice was shaking. "You actually did it." Tried to speak, but no words came. He just nodded, too tired and too emotional to say anything. Stepped forward. Her eyes were full of tears, but she was smiling. "Captain, what you have done today, my people thought it was impossible. We thought no one would ever stand for us. We thought hope was dead." She placed her hand over her heart. "You proved us wrong. You showed the galaxy that kindness is not weakness, that compassion is not foolishness, that one species, young and small and afraid, could look at the darkness and say, 'No, not today, not ever.'" Her glow brightened until she looked like a star standing in human form. They have a tradition. When someone does something truly extraordinary, we give them a gift. It is the greatest gift we can give. She closed her eyes and suddenly felt something warm spreading through his body. It was like sunlight on his skin, like the feeling of coming home after a long journey. It filled every part of him, driving away the exhaustion and the fear and the pain. When he opened his eyes, his hands were glowing. It was faint, a soft, warm light just beneath his skin, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. He stared at it in wonder. He was not. This should not be possible. "The light is hope," said softly. "It is connection. It is the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. You always had it inside you, Captain. We just helped it become visible." Across the fleet, the same thing was happening. Every human who had fought in the battle was beginning to glow, faintly, softly, but unmistakably. They were becoming something new. Not quite what they had been before either. They were becoming what they had always had the potential to be. A species that carried hope in their very skin. In the years that followed, everything changed. The Battle of the Outer Rim was just the beginning. The Dominion returned twice more, with larger fleets and greater determination. Both times humanity stood against them. Both times the Dominion was pushed back. Other species took notice. The three who had sent secret information during the first battle came forward openly. Then more joined them. Then more. Slowly, carefully, a new alliance began to form. Species who had lived in fear for too long, who now saw that standing together was possible. The children grew up on Earth. They were raised by human families who loved them fiercely, taught in human schools, celebrated in human festivals. They became bridges between species, using their gifts to help others connect and understand each other. Became an ambassador, traveling the galaxy to speak about hope and connection. Her golden glow was visible from across any room she entered. She told the story of her rescue 1,000 times, and every time she made sure that one detail was never forgotten. We called for help for 200 years, she would say. 200 years in the darkness and no one came. We had given up hope. And then, one day, a small ship from a young species heard our signal. They did not know who we were. They did not know if we were dangerous. They only knew that children were hungry and alone. They came, they fed us, they protected us. When the entire galaxy said they should give us up, they refused, they fought for us. They died for us. She would pause, her glow brightening. That is what humanity is, not their technology, not their power, their hearts. Their stubborn, beautiful, impossible hearts. Captain Park retired eventually. He was old and tired, and the wars had taken much from him. But he was happy. He had lived to see everything he had hoped for, and more. He settled in a small house near the sea, where he could watch the waves and think about the past. Sometimes visited him, and they would sit together in comfortable silence. Sometimes the children came too, all 17 of them now grown, their lights bright and strong. On the last night of his life, sat on his porch, looking up at the stars. Was with him, holding his hand, her golden glow casting soft shadows on the ground. "Are you afraid?" she asked quietly. Smiled, "No, I lived a good life. I made choices I am proud of. What more can any person ask for?" She squeezed his hand. "Will you tell me again the story of how you found us?" He laughed softly. "You know it better than I do." "I know, but I like hearing you tell it." So he told her about the signal in the void, about the frozen moon and the broken ship, about 17 starving children huddled in the darkness, their lights almost gone, about a small piece of bread and a tiny hand reaching out in hope. "When you reached out to me," he said, his voice growing tired, "I saw your skin glowing like the stars, and I knew in that moment that everything was going to change. I did not know how. I did not know if it would be good or bad, but I knew that I had to help, because that is what you do when children are crying for bread. You feed them." Was crying now, her tears shining like liquid light. "You saved us." "No," said gently. "You saved us. You showed us what we could be. You gave us a reason to become something greater than ourselves." He closed his eyes. His own glow, fainter now after so many years, pulsed one last time, then faded. Sat with him until the sun came up, holding his hand, her light never dimming. When the others found her there in the morning, she was still crying, still glowing, still holding on to the man who had changed everything. They buried him near the sea, in a place where the stars were visible at night. Representatives from 100 species came to pay their respects. They sang songs of light and memory. Humans wept and laughed and told stories about the captain who had saved the galaxy by feeding hungry children. And every night, for generations afterward, the lights in the sky seemed just a little brighter. Because somewhere out there, the universe remembered what one man and his small crew had done. They remembered that hope is not something that dies easily. They remembered that kindness, even in the smallest form, can change everything. And they remembered that when children cry for bread, you feed them. That is what makes any species worthy of the stars. The end.